This comes down to whether the president can, in the first place, do anything like this, no matter how you feel about this. In other words, via executive order, which is what Republicans and some Republican attorneys general have been saying. So to weigh in on that is Austan Goolsbee, the former Obama Economic Council Chair, University of Chicago Booth economics professor. We've also got Kathryn Rooney Vera with us, Bulltick Capital market strategist. Last but certainly not least, Danielle DiMartino Booth, the Quill Intelligence CEO, former Dallas Fed advisor. Experts on money, all. Also, let me begin with you, without even getting into the particulars of what the president wants to do here and relieve student debt for folks, that he went a step too far, that this is something that a president can't do on his own via an executive order and an executive command. What do you say?
Well, I mean, in a way, you're asking me a legal question. I'm not a lawyer. I don't
but if
know
you've
the
watched
answer to that.
legal shows like me,
Court...
you can be an expert. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I saw the Supreme Court seemed to say that they weren't going to take the challenges, and then a different court said they would take the challenges. We've seen if you remember in the Trump administration when they made big payments to farmers in response to the tariffs, we've seen in the tax code, we've now seen in the student loan relief that executive orders, there are at least some circumstances where executive orders allow the federal government for money that it's collecting to say they're not going to collect it. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's going to be resolved in the next 1 month type of thing. Yeah,
well, you know, he's exactly right on that, Kathryn. I mean, President Trump did do this a lot, and his predecessor often did this a lot. That we can get into the vagaries of the financing and all of that. But I'm just wondering going forward what the message is. I mean, there is the side issue of how you pay for all of this. You know, given the progress on the deficit, I've had a number of Democrats this past week who said, well, that's savings, even though it's sort of a more widened credit line now since we, you know, pared it by about $1.5 trillion, that will pay for it. What did you think of that?
Well, I think this is just another example of distortive government intervention that ends up hurting the very people whose votes they're trying to effectively buy. This is a moral hazard as well, so somebody's got to pay for it, and it's going to be, guess who? The taxpayers. Nothing is free, so every government handout or giveaway that occurs, somebody has to pay for it. And the moral hazard aspect, Neil, is that the student who is going to be going to college will get the impression that there's a government backstop. So he or she is going to indebt himself more and handicap their future even further, expecting this to continue, which it effectively cannot. So I think it's a major issue, especially in an inflationary environment, Neil, where we have inflation at nearly 8.5%, the highest in 40 years. You know, it's very silly, I think, and I think it's a blatant government ploy to buy votes ahead of the November elections.
Would not be the first administration to try that. Danielle, let me ask you a little bit about your view from the Fed, if you don't mind, and that however you look at this, it's seen as stimulative, and that this money is going to further get spending going because people have up to $20,000 more in savings that they could spend, and that worries the Federal Reserve and might lead to a continued pace of interest rate hikes, even though yesterday's advance in the market seemed to be based on the notion that the Fed might not be doing that, or to the degree we feared they would. Where are you on this?
So it is clear that there's pushback internally at the Federal Reserve in terms of continuing on with 0.75 of a percentage point rate hikes. So yesterday we saw the first reprieve, if you will, but in a parallel to what we've recently seen in Great Britain, I think it is very harmful to the Federal Reserve's efforts to bring inflation down if you have fiscal activity that's moving in the opposite direction. So there are two forces that are running against one another, and it makes the Fed's job in terms of controlling inflation that much more difficult. And I'll go back to what Kathryn said, and as somebody who paid off her student loans in full, the moral hazard aspect is just it's awful. And I think we need to focus on that, in addition to what all of my friends who are constitutional experts have told me, and that's that I believe Congress has the power of the purse. And this is the $400 billion estimate, I believe, is at the low end of some other nonpartisan estimates of what this is going to cost. Again, this works against what the Federal Reserve is trying to do in containing inflation.
Well, I just told my two sons in college, you're on your own, guys. Your mother and I are keeping every single penny. That didn't go down well, but we'll see. Austan, if I could step back, and we were talking about the Federal Reserve and the environment right now and the markets, and If you think about it, everything's been hinging on the Federal Reserve and how far and long it goes hiking rates. If it is indeed true that they're rethinking being as aggressive, and again, it's a leak presumably from the Fed, and obviously Danielle would know a lot more about that than I would, but that if that is the case, is that a good or bad thing?
Well, look, as you know, Neil, the Fed's been totally data dependent, that they're looking at the economy. If inflation keeps rising, I don't know that I see that the Fed is in a pivot mode. I think they're fairly aggressively raising rates as fast as they have in decades to try to stop that. So that you can't answer, is it good or bad, that if the Fed pauses, unless the Fed actually does pause, and whether the Fed pause is going to depend on what happens to inflation. I mean,
Yeah.
they might not pause at all.
Yeah, and we might have it wrong. If that is the case, Kathryn, markets did jump on that notion. All the major averages last week were up a minimum 4.5%. Where are we going here? Is this the pivot moment for the markets? Is there a lot of people looking at their 401ks, their pension statements, and saying, oh my God, this has got to end? Are we closer to the end, or is this a head fake?
If the Fed effectively cuts rates when we're 4 times the inflation target, I can answer that question. I think it would be bad. I think it would be a net negative. The Fed would lose complete inflation-fighting credibility. The Fed has a dual mandate, Neil. That's 2% inflation, and that's full employment. The labor market is way overheated, has been for more than a year. The Fed helped create the problem that we're currently in by way passing the expiration date on its very expansionary monetary policy. So the Fed's about a year behind the curve. They need to continue to hike rates. We're going to go into recession. That's my view. And the only way that we get back to the 2% target is if unemployment goes higher. We're at record low unemployment rates. The Fed helped get us there. Now the Fed has to get us out of there. If they kind of, chicken out and cut rates, then I think the market will take a dive, because inflation will therefore become endemic. Everyone will expect inflation to remain high, and it will, until the Fed, at the end of the day, down the line, hikes rates to kill inflation. So the Fed has to do its job. It has to fulfill its mandate, and it can't cow to markets or create a third mandate that it really doesn't have by law.
We shall see. Still early in the go, as they say.
Yes.
Guys, thank you all very, very much.